It wasn't an army that conquered India. It wasn't a king or a queen who first brought the subcontinent to its knees. The conquest of one of the world's wealthiest civilizations was engineered by a private corporation, run from a small office in London. This single company, driven by shareholder greed, amassed its own army, manipulated princes, and plundered a nation's wealth until it became an empire unto itself. This is the story of how a group of merchants pulled off the greatest corporate takeover in human history, a saga of betrayal and brutality that forever changed the world. The story begins not with warships, but with spices. In the 17th century, the British East India Company was just one of many European trading firms desperate for a piece of the legendary riches of the East. They arrived at the court of the powerful Mughal emperors not as conquerors, but as humble petitioners seeking permission to trade. They were granted a small foothold, a few trading posts along the coast. For over a century, they were just that, traders. But as the once mighty Mughal Empire began to fracture, the company's directors in London saw an opportunity. They started to play a different game. They began lending money to local princes, offering military support to one ruler against another, and slowly, insidiously, making themselves indispensable. They weren't just trading goods anymore. They were trading in power, and their true ambition was beginning to surface. The turning point came in 1757 at the Battle of Plassey. This wasn't a glorious battle of empires. It was a masterclass in corporate espionage and betrayal. Robert Clive, an ambitious and ruthless company official, faced the massive army of the Nawab of Bengal, Siraj ud-Dawla. Clive was hopelessly outnumbered, but he had an ace up his sleeve: conspiracy. He had secretly struck a deal with Mir Jafar, the Nawab's own military commander. Clive promised to make Mir Jafar the new Nawab in exchange for his treachery on the battlefield. When the battle began, a huge portion of the Nawab's army, under Mir Jafar's command, simply stood down and refused to fight. The battle was over before it truly began. The Nawab was captured and executed, and the company installed their puppet on the throne. But that wasn't the whole story. The real prize was yet to come. With their puppet ruler in place, the East India Company made its most audacious move yet. In 1765, the weakened Mughal emperor was forced to grant the company the Diwani of Bengal, Bihar, and Orissa. This was the right to collect taxes from over 20 million people. Suddenly, a private corporation had the power of a state. They were no longer just merchants. They were rulers. The result was catastrophic. The company's only goal was to maximize profit for its shareholders. They jacked up taxes, shattered traditional farming systems, and stockpiled grain for their own armies while the people starved. This ruthless plunder led directly to the Great Bengal Famine of 1770, a man-made disaster where an estimated 10 million people perished. The company's profits soared while a third of Bengal's population was wiped out. Having bled Bengal dry, the company set its sights on the rest of India. They perfected a strategy of predatory expansion, using a mix of brute force and legal manipulation. Their most infamous tool was the doctrine of lapse. This was a policy devised by Lord Dalhousie, which stated that if an Indian ruler died without a direct male heir, his kingdom would be automatically absorbed by the company. For centuries, Indian rulers had adopted heirs, a perfectly legitimate and accepted practice. The British simply declared it invalid. One by one, independent kingdoms like Satara, Jaipur, and Nagpur were swallowed whole without a single shot being fired. It was annexation through paperwork, a cold, bureaucratic conquest that disguised outright theft as legal procedure. The Indian princes were trapped, their sovereignty erased by the stroke of a pen. By the mid-19th century, resentment against the company was a raging fire waiting for a spark. The spark came in 1857. A rumor spread like wildfire among the sepoys, the Indian soldiers in the company Horse Army, that the new rifle cartridges were greased with a mixture of cow and pig fat. For Hindu soldiers, the cow was sacred. For Muslim soldiers, the pig was unclean. To load the rifle, they had to bite the cartridge open. This was seen as a deliberate attack on their faith. a final, unforgivable insult from their foreign masters. But the cartridges were just the tipping point. Decades of economic exploitation, land seizures, and cultural arrogance had pushed millions to the edge. The resulting explosion of violence, known as the Indian Rebellion of 1857, was a brutal, desperate war for freedom. The rebellion was ultimately crushed with overwhelming and horrific violence. Entire villages were burned, and rebels were subjected to gruesome public executions. But the sheer scale of the uprising sent shockwaves back to London. The British government could no longer ignore the monster it had created. The East India Company had become too powerful, too reckless, and its private army had plunged a massive territory into chaos. In 1858, the British Parliament passed the Government of India Act, dissolving the company and transferring all its territories and powers directly to the British Crown. Queen Victoria was declared the Empress of India. The age of corporate rule was over, and the era of the British Raj had officially begun. The takeover was complete, rebranded from a corporate venture to an imperial project. The story of how Britain conquered India is a chilling reminder of how unchecked corporate power can lead to national devastation. It wasn't a swift invasion, but a slow, methodical poisoning that spanned generations. It started with trade, morphed into political manipulation, escalated into military conquest, and was finalized with bureaucratic control. The East India Company laid the foundation of exploitation and control, creating a system so effective that the British Crown simply took it over and ran it for another 90 years. The conquest of India stands as a stark warning that sometimes the most dangerous invaders aren't foreign armies, but men in boardrooms, armed with contracts, ledgers, and an insatiable hunger for profit.